as patsies on the occasion of 9/11. Now, when you look at this plane crashing, just ask yourself, how much debris should have been there? A massive amount of debris, and yet you heard the reporters tell you from scratch that there was no sign, no indication any plane was there. Suppose it had disappeared into an abandoned mine shaft. Well, we know what to do when miners are trapped in abandoned mine shafts. We get out the bright lights, we get out the equipment, and we dig 24/7 in the hope that by some miracle someone might have survived. We did not do that here. We kept the reporters 1,000 yards away, and we tidied up the scene, which George Nelson, that air crash investigator from the Air Force, told me looked to him as though someone had taken a bulldozer out there, filled it with trash, and blown it up. So they didn't conduct the kind of active response, heroic measures to try to save. In fact, they never even tried to extract the bodies of the passengers from the abandoned mine shaft. How bad is that? There is no hangar where the fragments from this Flight 93, or that Flight 77, or that Flight 11, or that Flight 175 have been reconstructed, and yet that's the standard operating procedure when you have an air crash investigation. In fact, as I observed before, the FBI and the NTSB said they didn't have to investigate. Why? Because we all saw it on television. Whoa. Now here was the crash site once again, and believe me, in tidying this up, they were very efficient. They even trimmed the burned foliage and limbs from the trees, and I'm convinced that was so they couldn't be subjected to chemical analysis, which would have shown that they had just been torched, that this hadn't been caused by any jet fuel-based fires. Flight 93, you've already seen that. There is this interesting alternative story about what happened here, to wit that the plane might have been shot down. And we have this fascinating story that at precisely 9:38 hours, an alarm was sounded at Langley, where there was a hotshot group of Air National Guard pilots known as the Happy Hooligans, who were normally based at Fargo in North Dakota. And they came out they were called out, tracked the target, received the order. At 9:57, they spotted the aircraft. After confirmation order was received, Major Rick Gibney, shown here, fired 2 Sidewinder missiles at the aircraft and destroyed it in mid-flight at precisely 9:58. He was awarded a medal from the governor 1 year later for his heroic actions, as well as decorated by Congress. Well, this is a fascinating story, but it's not the only story we have about Flight 93. There was also a report by a television crew that Flight 93 actually landed at Cleveland, that it was taken to a distant hangar, that some 200 passengers were unloaded, which is a staggering number because each of these planes was only 1/4 full. You might ask yourself how any airline could keep in business and make a profit if it's flying planes cross-country, transcontinental flights only 1/4 full. But that meant is all the passengers from all 4 flights could, hypothetically, have been loaded aboard a single flight. The mayor of the city of Cleveland came out, was interviewed by the station, identified this as Flight 93, said it was being taken to a secure hangar under great security. The passengers were being offloaded at a distant hangar. Now that story, I followed its history, was revised 14 times before it was simply deleted. 14 times they tried to revise the story to salvage it. So what happened to Flight 93? Well, we know an awful lot here about this case. We know there's no evidence the hijackers were aboard the plane. We don't have the parts of the plane. We don't even have passenger manifests that include the names of any Arab person, much less of the alleged hijackers. What do we have? A mass media attack. This is Frank Wisner, who used to refer to the mass media as the giant Wurlitzer, where any story he wanted to get out, he would submit to the various media entities. Right. Now, Carl Bernstein, who together with Bob Woodward published All the President's Men exposing the Watergate scandal, in 1977 conducted an investigation of the relationship between the CIA and the media. And he had CIA officials boasting to him that their greatest successes have been with Time Life, with the New York Times, and with CBS. And I say to you, if in 1977 you controlled Time Life, CBS, and the New York Times, you had a lock on the major media. Subsequently, William Colby former director of the CIA, observed that the CIA owns every person of significance in the mass media. So if you want to ask why there's trouble getting the truth out about 9/11, even when so much is known, why it's so difficult to get the attention of the Congress when so much is known, when the evidence is so blatant, when the case is so overwhelming, for lies by the American government, where the only reasonable explanation is the government has been lying to the American people and withholding the idea of a serious investigation is because the government itself was complicit in these events, which were acts of terrorism intended to instill fear into the American people, to manipulate us for political purposes, and the end result have been this illegal, immoral wars in Iraq and Afghanistan in violation of international law, the UN Charter, and the U.S. Constitution. And for that reason, thank Bush campaign. I'll be very glad to take questions. Yeah.
Yeah, my question actually is to point out something that I saw on one of your slides that I never noticed before, and perhaps you already knew about, which is that the 5 frames of video from the Pentagon carry a date of September 12th at 5 p.m.
Yes, they have the wrong date and the wrong time. You're absolutely right. My belief is that they were put out as kind of a PR operation and to see what response they would get. It turns out that, and they had the wrong date time so they could disavow that they actually were official, because, I mean, what could be more obvious? They have the wrong time and date, right? And yet the events they purport to represent could not be any other events than those of 9/11. So what's going on here? Well, the Pentagon withheld releasing any footage, even though it had as many as 83 videos that should have shown what happened on 9/11, as many as 83. Eventually, they would release 3. Bill O'Reilly got a hold of one of them, and he played it before he'd watched it on his show, saying this is going to lay to rest all the conspiracy theories. After he played the video, he saw no more of a plane than you see in that single frame, and he had to admit he didn't see any plane there. And he was in one of the rare moments of humility of his entire professional career, because the video he showed that was supposed to lay to rest the conspiracy theories complaint did no such thing. So you're quite right, and I think the reason is the one I offer. Please.
Could questioners go to the microphones, please? We're recording this.
Well, if you could come up to the mic. This is for recording purposes.
Mr. Fetzer, I seem to notice that the engine wreckage that was shown on the grass from the Pentagon looked like it was a radial compressor from a jet engine.
Oh, radial compressor, you're saying? This is
radio
back.
I think it was a radial compressor.
Radial compressor? This?
Yeah, that looks like a radial one. I believe that airliners have axial compressors. I don't think that even is anything like an airliner engine part.
Good.
I've seen radial compressors in wreckage up near Area 51, and these were from smaller jets, fighters, and they seem to be just like this, pretty much radial types.
Well, I appreciate that observation. Do you think then it might substantiate or tend to support the idea of a smaller plane having hit the building?
Yeah, I think that's nothing to do with an airliner.
Nothing to do with an airliner in any case.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So what is your best guess? What do you think the best evidence is for what happened to the passengers?
Well, I'll tell you, the business about the passengers is all very mysterious. Let me give you a couple of illustrations. In the case of the families of those who died at the World Trade Center, and let me just say in passing that we regard our efforts to discover the truth about how and why they died as the highest form of respect we could pay to them, is completely different than the attitudes of the survivors of the purported airplane crashes. The survivors of the Twin Towers and so forth are very eager to know the truth. They're willing to talk about it. The plane crash survivors in general don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. Most of them, or some of them, I mean, listen, there was one study done of 19 parties who were alleged to have made cell phone or other phone calls from these planes.